Hey, Captain TJ here with the Georgia Fishing Company. This is your Thanksgiving week fishing report and the forecast for next week. This week, the inshore fishing started out stellar in spite of the big tide. So we had some 9-foot tides, be like an 8.5-foot high tide and like a negative half a foot low, so about a 9-foot net tide. And in spite of that, everybody was catching fish. And if you look at not just the fish I caught, but the fish that other people caught, it was a mixed bag of trout, redfish, black drum, and sheep's head. Now, typically, where are you going to find that kind of mixed bag? Docks, rocks, trees. So we're looking at steep bluffs with junk, whether it's rocks, old pilings, docks, is some just junk fishing. You want gnarly stuff that you're going to lose hooks and lose floats. If you're worried about getting hung, if you're having to pay attention to where you're drifting, you're in the right stuff. I was finding most of my bites in the 15-foot range, so fishing fairly deep. This is mostly throughout the outgoing tide, so 15 feet deep, and then as the tide got down, maybe about 12 feet deep. That was the area I was focusing on. Plenty of guys catching them up shallow on the shells, but that was more on the incoming tide. Now, as the week's gone on, today we struggled. Today is Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, and we had a rough time out there today. We went a couple hours without a bite, just picking around on the incoming tide. We'd find some clean water, but just not a lot of action. And then finally, we said, you know what, I've had enough of the trout. Let's go catch some redfish, and that's what we did. We caught redfish up to 30 inches. Talked to several other boats that really struggled on the incoming tide this morning. However, I think that these outgoing tides are going to be where it's at. I think if we would have left in the 12 to 2 o'clock range and fished the last of the outgoing, I think it would have been a different story. We could have fished some of that outgoing tide stuff, some of that low tide stuff, just like what I was describing, and done a lot better. So this coming up week, that's kind of what we're going to have. I'm looking at the tides right here, and let's see, starting on Monday, we've got a 12 p.m. high tide, but let's see, by next Friday the 6th, we have a 9:51 a.m. low tide, so a mid-morning low tide. I think that's beautiful for this time of year. You're going to be able to fish the last 2 hours of outgoing first thing in the morning, first 2 hours of incoming before lunch, and do a lot of damage. So that's going to be pretty good. The tides are, there's not going to be much current at all. For example, on Tuesday, high tides of 5.8 and low tides of 1.3. So you're going to have 4.5 feet of total tide movement. Not much at all there. So, so later in the week, the tides get a little bit better, more along the lines of 5 feet of tide movement. Plus we've got some nasty weather coming the first of the week. Sunday, Monday, it's going to get a little bit gnarly. So I think more towards the end of next week is going to be the time to go. I think the tides are going to be in your favor. Going to have those mid to late morning low tides and a little bit bigger tide, so you're going to have the current that you really need. Other than that, offshore is kind of the same. Roaming schools of bull reds out on the wrecks. Possibly a cobia or two around if you know where to look. And out at the Gulf Stream, they're catching some wahoo and blackfin tuna pretty regularly. One thing I want to show you, especially this, I didn't think about this, but this is going to be a good time to tell you this. When tides get a little funky, there's not a lot of drift for your live baits. Go back to last week's report and look at the tip, and remember what I was saying about downsizing your tackle. When the tide's not moving fast, downsize your tackle if you're fishing live bait. But if you want to just cover more water, switch to the jig. And this is one that I've had luck with. I always say it's conveniently named because I break this out the week of Thanksgiving, just like you do your Christmas tree. And this color pattern is called Christmas Tree. It's made by Gotcha. You can get them on Amazon. You used to be able to buy them at Tackle Shack, and I think you may be able to get them like at the hardware store downtown, but you don't find these in a lot of tackle shops. So Gotcha, Christmas Tree, curly tail grub, unpainted jig head, plain old lead jig head, 1/8 ounce. That's That's a deadly rig right there. So when you're dealing with no current and you're dealing with clear water, typically between Thanksgiving and Christmas, this is money right here. You can crush them on this thing. So that's my tip for this week. Go get some Christmas tree grubs, some unpainted jig heads, 1/8 ounce, and do work. Thanks, tight lines.